I know some schools are on spring break now. If you're located in the south of the US, I know some of them are having their spring break in March. If this is your first time joining our Montessori town halls, welcome. We host these every single Thursday. They're always free to join, and any Montessori school leader or administrator is welcome to join any of them. We share them across community groups. And it's always, like I said, free to join. This is very much a safe and collaborative space. Throughout the call, you can utilize the chat to make sure you ask any questions or share ideas and comments. We welcome conversation and connection on these calls. Today's focus is going to be on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Montessori space. We've been looking forward to having a call on this because we believe that this is something that Maria Montessori really considered throughout her time as an educator, a scientist, and she wanted to make education accessible to every child. So it's one that we've been looking forward to having. We're joined today by two amazing team members of Embracing Equity, Carly Riley and Dr. Nicole Evans. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to them so they can share their presentation and answer your questions.
All right, welcome everybody. So glad that you're here. Certainly see some friends of ours in here, and we are so excited to be in this community. My name is Dr. Nicole Evans. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I serve as the Senior Director of Leadership at Embracing Equity. Before I go deeply into this topic, I also want to uplift my time as a principal at City Garden Montessori, which is a Montessori school here in St. Louis, where both Carly and I are calling in from, which is also the unceded territory of the Missouri, the Osage, and the Illinois Confederacy. So super exciting to be here. We both have foundations in Montessori, so this feels like home. And so before we go on, I'd like to pass it to my partner in collaboration, Carly.
Hi, y'all. I'm Carly Riley. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm really excited to be here. I have a background in Montessori as a primary Montessori guide in the south side of Chicago, as well as in Memphis, Tennessee, in public Montessori programs. And it always feels like we come home when we're working with other Montessorians. So thank you so much for having us here today. Now I am Embracing Equity's Senior Director of Learning, and I do a lot of our professional development and facilitation and programming. And we're thrilled to be able to introduce you to us as an organization, us as individuals, and for us to do a little bit of work together.
So as an organization, for those of you who might be new to Embracing Equity, our mission is to cultivate the mindsets and practices necessary to create an affirming, inclusive, and equitable educational ecosystem. That's a mouthful. Ultimately, what we want to see, our vision is that we see a just society where all children and adults actually are affirmed in their whole humanity and nurtured to their fullest potential. So join us, you all, as we are on this journey.
Yeah, and you may have picked up from the name of our organization, we are committed to equity and specifically racial equity. So we just wanted to take a minute to talk about what those words mean to us. So equality is essentially treating every single person the same. Equality says that all people have the same rights, opportunities, and access to resources. It's this idea that everybody's beginning at the same place. But we know that we live in a society where systemic and structural racism and oppression exists. And so we think about things in terms of equity. Unlike equality, it emphasizes treating everyone the same. Equity recognizes that people start from different positions. Equity acknowledges that people may require different levels of support to achieve the same outcomes. And the goal of equity is to create a just and inclusive society. And in that society, all individuals have the opportunity to reach their full potential. And when we're talking about equity, like I said, we center our work around racial equity, which goes further by addressing systemic factors that contribute to disparities and striving to ensure fairness and justice for all groups, recognizing that achieving equality may require different strategies for different communities. So equity addresses historical and systemic injustices that have led to disparities among racial and ethnic groups. And in that way, it helps create a more equal access for all people. And we're going to drop into the chat an article that talks a lot more about this difference between equity and equality, and also highlights equity in relationship to gender and ability and so on. So check that article out when you get a chance.
All right. Thank you, Carly. Just to add to that, one of our dear friends, Rashi, says, here's how I think of it. Equality means everyone gets a shoe. Equity means everyone gets a shoe that fits. So I love that very simple metaphor for something that can be confusing. So now you all, you're here, we're gathered, just wondering, what is your why? So now that we've told you a little bit about us, what we aim to do, we want to hear about you. Why are you personally committed to this equity work? Because here's what we know. It's not easy. It's difficult. It's complex. Let me say not difficult. It's complex. How are you personally implicated in the work? So let's just take maybe 2 minutes to think that through. And I want to hear you. Bring your voices into the room. What is your why? What is your why?
And I see some familiar faces of people who are with us in our leadership residency or have worked with us before. Maybe we'll put you all on the spot to go first.
Sure, I'll jump in and share a why. We've been really grateful to have worked with Embrace Youth Equity over the past year. We have had leaders from our Montessori school working in the leadership residency program. And yeah, so my why, I feel like it continues to evolve, but I think it's come for me to this place of wanting to make sure that everyone who encounters our school, whether it's as a family, a student, a prospective family, a board member, a community member, a friend, that feels a profound sense of belonging and that they are able to see themselves reflected in the school. And so we're doing some deep work to figure out what that means for us as a community and where our blind spots might be and how to make sure that we are really thinking about voices, how to include many different voices at the table for figuring that out. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. What is your why? Hi, Nora.
I can
Why?
share. Hi. Unless someone else is just about to.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Lynn.
I'm Lonnie. Yeah, we're from WB Square School. We're located in Ridgewood, Queens, which is a neighborhood that's been evolving and changing, and there's been a lot of gentrification in the area as well. And so we have been struggling with the idea of like how to make Montessori accessible and inclusive, and what that means, like either fiscally or in just approach in ideology and parent education as well. So this is something we have been thinking about, and we're now a 5th year school. So I feel like the first few years it was just establishing our own culture, and now it's like opening that lens and looking at the community and seeing how we can be inclusive and reflective of the changing community.
Thank you. Thank you, Lonnie. Anybody else? Why are you personally committed to this?
I'll go. Hey, Dr. Evans. Hey, Carly.
Hi.
Hi. So, working in the school and in the setting that I find myself in, I feel like it's really important to bring anti-racism work into white spaces as well, and make sure that we are raising children in all spaces to understand equity and what that means, what that looks like, and to ensure that we don't fall into a trap of thinking we don't need to talk about these things with our students as well. And so that's a big commitment of our school. Also, and being in, I know that Lanny talked about affordability. You know, my commitment is also into working in public Montessori. I've my entire year career has been in public Montessoris in different cities and states and formats, and so that's a huge part of what I do.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. Anybody else like to share? What's your why? Why are you personally committed to this equity work?
I can go. Hi, I'm Kari we are a school in New Hampshire that serves children 3 through 15. And I think as a Montessorian, there's been an assumption that we are equitable because we love children, we appreciate everyone, and the whole thing. And we are also in a state that is kind of grappling with especially racial diversity right now in relation to schools. There's some rules that have come into play in our state. So my why is to, first of all, becoming aware that just because we're Montessori people doesn't mean that we're, always on the right path in terms of what equity means, and to be more intentional within our school on that awareness and the dignity of all of our children. And as our area becomes much more diverse, we want to be able to reflect and to have that sense of belonging for everyone.
Thank you.
I'll share a little more personally. I'm Jennifer Nolan. I'm coming from Seton Montessori, which is in the Clarendon Hills, Chicagoland area. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I echo all of these things on the kind of Montessori mission side of things, but I happen to also be a mother of an adopted child from Guatemala. So we are a racial family. And as he comes into his sense of truly coming to know himself as a young adult, this has become, talk about ripping off the blinders and the awareness and what his experience is that's so different than my lived experience. We also have our first grandchild, and I'd like to set a different path with this new generation to help achieve all of the goals that we've been sharing here.
Thank you.
I can share. I jumped on late, so we're just talking. Can you just say again where we're at? Okay.
Yeah. What is your why? Why are you personally committed to equity work? How are you personally implicated in the work, or just what is your why?
Yeah. I guess my why is rooted in the work that I do every day. I'm with the Montessori Center in Minnesota. We're a training center, and then we have a collaborative schools who are very rooted in increasing access to Montessori and bringing it to their own culturally rooted communities. And so part of my why is just rooted in doing that work in community and working alongside these school leaders. And I think as a training center, our mission is rooted in access. And so we really need to be doing that work ourselves internally and externally. And I think I come from a Head Start background. So a lot of the advocacy and legislative work that I've done over the last decade has been talking about the achievement gap and opportunity gap that is insanely huge in Minnesota. And I think we've gotten to a point where we're just really tired of talking about the gap and not actually seeing any movement in closing the gap, even though there's a lot of people talking about closing the gap. And I think that we all need to turn the lens on ourselves and be talking about anti-bias, anti-racist in the classroom and doing that work in the classroom with children. And that's actually the root of where those gaps begin to close instead of external things here and there. So yeah, that's where my why comes from.
Thank you. Thank you, Nora.
I'll go next. Hi, Dr. Evans.
Hi,
I will just piggyback on what Carrie said earlier. I am in my 10th year as head of school at pre-primary through upper elementary 6th grade Montessori school in Marin County, California. And I think for many, many years, I just sort of was riding on the assumption that I felt that diversity, equity, inclusion were things that were kind of baked into our values, and it's in our mission statement. And you know, I think I started really starting to think differently about 4 years ago, as many of us did in 2020, and did some work with my team on anti-racist, anti-bias work as educators. And then this year, it just really, I think, kind of hit home for me that there, you know, I've been looking at this through my own lens as just a, you know, a white woman. And I wanted to really start unpacking, you know, what are we really walking our talk, and are we really providing a school that values every child for who they are? I've assumed we have been, but and there's been a few things that have come up this year that have made me question that. And we have one of the distinguishing, sort of not very proud things, labels of being located in Marin County, which is like probably one of the most progressive politically places in the country. And we are also the least diverse county in the entire Bay Area. There's a lot of reasons and history for that. So we have this like population that, you know, we believe we're very, we know what we're doing and we're all on the same page. And I think there's so much more to it when it comes to actually looking at our school and our families and how we can support everybody and get out of our silos and like bring in the families of color into different parts of the community that they may have felt excluded from, that I don't even know about. And so kind of we've been trying to dive deep into that work this year.
Thank you. Thank you. Definitely want to lift up what Rachel's saying. Busy in Rachel's office right now, but Montessori was built in a white European mindset. So biases will naturally exist, whether educators are aware of them or not. I'd like to be able to explore these unknown biases. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that. What else? What else?
I'm happy to share. I'm going to keep my camera off most of this because I have children coming and going, as we all do. No, so I work in admissions and enrollment for Three Tree Montessori, which is just south of Seattle, Washington. And I think for me, among all the reasons that you've all listed, I'm also kind of constantly thinking about who is not being heard, who is not showing up to tour the school, who aren't we reaching, and why, right? So is it because of the diversity of the school or the lack thereof? Is it something that's going on in Montessori specifically? Is it, something in the way I give tours and talk about Montessori, right? So I think for me, and also realizing that this work there's no end point, right? Like this is a constant thing. And so I'm just kind of always here for the conversation, whether it's a very kind of beginning level conversation or it's more in depth and advanced. So like, I just kind of want to be part of all of it so that I can also be part of dismantling all of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. I mean, just powerful, wise, and yeah, thank you. That's just a thank you. All right.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing your whys. It was great to hear from you. And we heard a lot of things around inclusivity and sort of dismantling biases, and especially this idea of this people-centered approach, this feeling of belonging. And that's one way of getting to equity, is through building a culture and a sense of belonging. It's of course not all that equity is, but it's one palpable way of feeling equity within your body. Because we know when we don't feel like we belong. And the opposite is also true. We know what it feels like when we do belong. We want to help schools and organizations create spaces where all of our team members, our children, our families, and our communities are feeling that sense of belonging through an equity-centered approach. So for today, we're going to turn the mirror on ourselves and focus specifically on us and our work teams, so the adults that are in the building. And belonging at work is an employee's sense that their uniqueness is accepted, even treasured by their organization and colleagues. It's an accumulation of day-to-day experiences that enable a person to feel safe and to bring their full unique self to work. So why does belonging matter? And I've got a slide I want to show you all. Why does belonging matter? And it matters not just because you and I say it matters. It matters because peer-reviewed, nationally recognized research tells us that it matters. So there's research that was conducted by SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, which is a national HR organization in the US. It tells us that when employees feel a sense of belonging, there's a 50% lower risk of turnover and 75% fewer sick days are used, and job performance is increased by an astounding 56%. So we at Embracing Equity know the profound results of building a culture of belonging, and it moves far beyond just performance, right? Equity, inclusion, and belonging are the foundation for a liberated future, for a strong organizational culture and institutional commitment to equity. So how do we create a sense of belonging? Well, we at Embracing Equity have developed our three-pronged approach, which is individual learning, interpersonal actions, and institutional transformation. And so what we mean by these three, the first being individual learning, is that we as people all need to raise our own knowledge, awareness, and action when it comes to identifying, analyzing, and knowing how to dismantle inequity and oppression. And it helps us cultivate that sense of belonging for ourselves and for the people around us. And we also need interpersonal action. Belonging is community building work. So we have to do it together. We have to link arms with people in our community to do this work effectively. And last, but certainly not least, the institutional transformation. We have to collectively create new systems and structures that center equity and liberation. So the way to building an equitable organization is tackling the work at all three of these levels.
All right. Thank you, Carly. Now, Carly said we're turning the mirror on ourselves, right? This is that opportunity, that chance to do that. And so one of our big whys at Embracing Equity is really to be in support of leaders like you as you are building equitable organizations and schools. And sometimes it can be hard to identify where you are collectively in that journey. So to help you determine where you are in that journey, we're going to do a quick activity, right? We're going to do an activity that we don't want you to overthink it, but we're going to give you some guidelines to determining, all right, where are we as an organization in this journey, in this equity journey? All right, so let's check this out. Are you seed, sprout, or tree? All right, let's start with seed. If you are seed in that stage, your organization sees itself as a non-racist institution. You might have an equity statement. There could be a volunteer DEI, DEIB, JEDI, whichever you have named it, equity committee. Maybe there's annual DEI trainings as people are onboarding and mandatory trainings throughout the year. Or overall, there's an understanding that racism and inequity is a barrier. So you might be at the seed stage. So be thinking about that. Or you could be at the sprout stage. Sprout, it's coming up. Instead of non-racist, you're striving to be an anti-racist institution. There's a difference. There may be some shared DEI language and terminology. You have begun to start turning that mirror on yourselves, right? You're starting to analyze, where is the systemic oppression within this institution? You are probably actively recruiting members of groups that have been historically marginalized and historically denied access. You're collecting culture and climate data for your staff, your students, and the community. And you really do have accountability to marginalized communities. Or perhaps you're at the tree stage. In the tree stage, not only did you analyze what it looks like in your organization, now you are intentionally restructuring of the organization based upon this equity and anti-racist analyses, right? Your decision-making is shared with those most impacted, not just top down. We're pulling folks in who are being impacted, mostly marginalized groups. There's a significant budget line item that supports the DEI work. We're not taping it together with glue and tape, right? We're like, nope, this is priority. It's an important, every year there's money to do this work. You're routinely using data to inform your ongoing DEI work, and your team members with historically marginalized identities are actively joining your organization, and not only joining, y'all, thriving within the organization. Okay, so let's look at all three put together. Okay, now don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. And for some of you, it is okay if you're like, Dr. Evans, we're at pre-seed. That's okay too. That's okay. So right now, I'm going to ask you to determine, where would you put your organization? And if you're really courageous and brave, drop it in the chat. Are you pre-seed? Are you seed? Sprout? Tree? Which one mostly resonates, right? Because there could be some that are in other places. Thank you. Thank you. That's all right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Seed, pre-seed, between seed and sprout. Yeah. Sprout. Yeah. We are getting there, Megan. We just spent a lot of time together. Yeah. Sprouting. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. If you're brave and courageous, just drop it in there. Seed, sprout. Yeah. Seed. Nice. Nice, y'all. Seed mostly. Yeah, you might have a few of the other. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Any yet? So, Wally, if I'm pronouncing that right, or you think you're pre-seed? You think, say more if you don't mind voicing over.
Yeah, Nicole, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I see all these things. I mean, we do have the intention of doing the right things, but there's nothing formalized or no structure in place. We don't do anything consciously, as you outlined here about annual training and things like that. But our heart is in the right place, and that's all we can see. I'm not sure where we would belong in this. That's why I didn't even say we belong to seed, because we're not even there.
So you might be pre-seed, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
You might be pre-seed. So You're before C, you're not quite, you're, like you said, you have good intentions. You're attending webinars like these, right? You're attending or Zoom meetings like these. You're thinking about it. You're grabbing information. That is okay. Yeah. Anybody else want to voice?
And Dr. Nicole, one question I had for you
Yeah.
is that
Mhm.
when you talk about the items that you see at the seed level, the sprout level, and the tree level, does that primarily apply to larger educational institutions or even like a small one with just maybe
Yes,
50?
even a small one, even a small one. It applies just to begin to think about this and look at it. I think, here's what I'll say, when I heard many of your whys, right? We want this to be accessible. We want it to be an inclusive environment. Several people talked about how there's this assumption that as Montessorians, we're already there, right? That it's naturally there, right? So I think this allows us to take a step back to say, you know what? It's not already inherently there. And let's be intentional. I heard that throughout your whys too. It's like, it's not really baked in, and we want to be intentional. So this view here gives you it gives you a big general blueprint of how do we get there? How do we make it intentional? How do we help that become a part of our why, whether there are 5 of us in the organization or 1,005 of us in the organization, right? Which most Montessori schools are not that big, but right? Or 105, let's say it that way. We want to be intentional and not, let's say this, we don't want to be well-intentioned, but ill-equipped. We don't want to stop at the good intentions, but no action steps. So the seed sprouting tree, it helps us plant that seed and get growing. So where you might be when I say pre-seed, you might be at preparing the soil. Do I have fertilizer? Is this good ground? Am I testing? Sometimes when you're planting, you're like, is this a good place to even plant, right? You're figuring all of those things out. So I think, yes, to your point, the size doesn't actually matter. I think it is your mission and your vision. Do we want to get to the point that we're not non-racist, but we're going to be anti-racist? Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to voice over their seed sprouting tree? Okay. What about questions? What
Yeah,
questions?
I'm gonna open it up to you all now. What questions do you have for us related to where your organization is at in your equity journey, or a thing specifically going on in your org that you want to talk about? We're here as a resource.
Yes.
Feel free to
Is-
drop them in the chat as well. Oh,
Yes.
go ahead, Ollie.
No, I was saying, is there any documentation that you guys might have that we can look at it that basically guides you in terms of how to start the process?
Well, we were going to end with this, but I'll drop it in the chat now. We have a couple free resources for you all, which one is you can sign up for a free coaching session with the amazing Dr. Nicole Evans. And you can sign up for a free strategy session to talk about how you can do this work at your school with our Chief Strategy Officer, Rashi Jawade. So yeah, and then please feel free to explore our website too. There's a ton of free resources that are on there now. Plus we do a lot of free webinars. We do those on a almost bi-weekly basis almost now. So yeah, stay engaged in our community. We'd love to support you, Ollie.
Absolutely. Megan was just talking about, she just completed a year-long leadership residency with us. So we walk with you. I mean, I think that is really one of the goals. So again, tap into to that is that this work is big. We realize that. And one of the things that we always say at Embracing Equity is that this is not an addition to the plate. This is the plate that everything else should sit on. So that's something that is super important with us. But
This
more
to work, I'm sorry. I'm saying for this to work in an organization, every staff member has to have a buy-in into this philosophy, right? For it to kind of fly.
Yes.
Can
Go. Yes, Megan, please. Yes. Go. Please go.
I'll respond to that. One thing that was really helpful as part of the leadership residency is that we had all of our staff completed an equity audit that was anonymous, right? Like it was submitted to Embracing Equity. They compiled the data. They gave us a report. It was hard, and it was a hard process to see some of that feedback, but it started us on a journey of being able to get and receive and metabolize that feedback and look at how to start doing things differently. And part of that led us to really looking at how to shift from what has been, even though we weren't intending it, but a more top-down structure to how to build that buy-in with staff. And I will say that we just came to a place, even though we had some ideas of how to make it work, even now from the beginning of the school year to this point, even how our staff meetings run, they function very differently. There's more participation in terms of who takes on different parts of the staff meetings, who's leading activities, but it's coming from staff, and they're building, it's like we're building that buy-in step by step by step, but it means changing like those three interlocking components, like changing a little bit in what we do in all of them to be able to move the whole thing. And kind of one of the most powerful things that happened is that as leaders, we knew that it needed to start with that like personal work first. But it took actually months of doing this work where actually our staff have decided like, hey, we actually think we need to start with the personal work first. Whereas if we had come in and said that, it would have landed a lot differently. So that was it's been a really powerful process. We're still in that journey, as I said. But I will say that equity audit was an incredibly valuable piece. We'd still go back to it. We still examine it as a staff and figure out how it can inform our work ahead.
Thanks, Megan.
Just one comment I'd like to add here, with respect to what was just told, is that, in line with what we call Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you may have heard about it. I can say, basically hierarchy of goals, in a sense that different level of goals that organizations have. I mean, some of them are very basic in terms of having proper teachers to teach, having enough students, and things like that. And you overcome that, and you go on to next level and next level, next level. And then I think, to me, it seems that this goal sits at a higher level of need of goals compared to others. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but and what I find is that many of the small schools are still struggling with achieving the lower level goals, that they don't even kind of have the energy to focus on this, the kind of things you're talking about. Maybe that's a mistake, but that's how in reality it ends up being.
Well, I mean, I think part of the work in equity is what Carly was talking about, is a sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging is really leaning into belonging for the students, belonging for the families, belonging for the staff, so that if you have created this culture and climate of belonging, then those things are going to happen because everyone has, you mentioned the word buy-in. We say ownership. When you have that sense of belonging, there's ownership. And those are some of the things that we work on and work with folks. That's equity as well. Yeah.
I was just gonna share just my own experience in this journey so far, as short as it's been. a couple things. One is that I started with our staff, and we each did in how, sort of anti-racist education, like self-paced course that was deeply personal because it really just started with our own experiences. And I found that very enlightening because I do think starting internally and doing the work personally seems like that has now paid off, because what I'm seeing is that my staff they do have ownership in this and they want to do this work.
Yeah.
And my board now is starting to feel some ownership and wanting to do the work. And I think where I'm coming up against kind of some challenges as our community, like we did bring in a wonderful speaker in the realm of just DEI, BJ, is kind of her thing, work. And she did an in-service for my staff this year. And then we brought her to host a parent education evening. And I noticed, and it wasn't lost on just, me, that a majority, not all, but a majority of the parents who came were parents of color. And so that just made me feel like, okay, there's so much work to do when obviously, and the parents of color that were there were engaged and hungry for this, and our teachers showed up for it. And it's hard to get parents anyway to come to parent education evening events because they're busy and they work and their children. But that's the part where I feel like I don't know how to get the rest of the community to feel that ownership. I know how to do it in the classrooms. I know how to do it with the teachers. I think I do. I think we're on a good start, but with the rest of the parents is where it feels kind of challenging.
And I think that's not an uncommon challenge. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sure, Jay, you're not the only person who's experienced that. One of the things that I talk to, I do a lot of work with white leaders to think about what our white anti-racist identity development looks like. And a big part of that is modeling what it looks like to be an engaged white person in equity work and in anti-racism work. So we first serve as a model for other people in our communities. And then personal invitations really matter. So the leveraging relationships that we have with the families that we notice aren't coming as readily to some of these events, reaching out to them personally, in the car line or with a phone call or at drop off or pickup, and saying, hey, we really value you. We really want to see you here. And the other thing too is that oftentimes when we're doing this work with children in our classrooms, our focus is on children of color. Like, how do we ensure that they feel that they belong, that there is inclusivity, that there's representations of them in the curriculum and in the work that we're doing? But we also need to be doing this work with white students so that they can see white role models who have engaged in abolitionist and equity work as well, and think about how they are creating senses of belonging for themselves and for their peers too. And when the children start getting bought into it, then the families become bought in too. So one, I think, really great way of doing this in a low lift is if you're already doing some audit work with your own classroom libraries, then sending home examples of how families can audit their home libraries, and they can start having these conversations with their children. That way you can do a little bit of parent education, but they're doing it with their child and aligned with what's happening in the classroom, and maybe planting some of those seeds for them to come to community events that are on related topics like diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice, and the sort. Any other questions folks have, or any other stories folks want to share?
Not so much a question, I suppose, but we met earlier as a staff in the beginning of the school year and kind of talked about what our journey towards, being a more equitable institution might look like and what some of our long-term goals are. And man, did we struggle with coming up with, like, where do we start? Like, where do we even begin? right? And we have team members that are like at every end of the spectrum in their work, right? And so we kind of settled on the self-work, and that I'm glad to hear that that's where you would lean people towards. I actually have right next to me, we're reading this book as anti-racist as a staff, and working through the journal, and then coming together. We have a meeting this afternoon to talk about it and kind of try to help get everybody closer to moving in the same direction as a team. You know, I think most people on our team are on board, but we still have a number that are like, we just treat everyone like humans. And how to say, yes, we do treat everyone like humans, but some humans are treated differently than others, and how to, really help bring those people that are at that level kind of up to a point where they're like really engaged and active in like looking internally and seeing where maybe some of the things that they benefit from not everyone is benefiting from in the same ways.
There's a resource that you might be interested in. We talked a little bit about this at the top, this idea of the difference between equality and equity, but this could be a helpful, it's at the top of our resource page. You just have to put your email address in to get access to the free resource. But that could be a helpful way to start too, is to really parsing out sure, like we want everybody to be able to achieve the same results, thrive in the same way, but equity means that sometimes we need to do different things to get there. That could be a helpful thing, is to build some of that shared vocabulary together on some of the more foundational topics, so that people have an understanding. Because I think some people are resistant, not because they don't believe in this work, but because they don't have the vocabulary yet to engage in the conversations, or the learning yet to do that. Which I think could be helpful. And Doc, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. That is some reluctance. That's why on the seed sprout tree, you'll see on the sprout, it says a shared language. So that if nothing else, even with different experiences, when I use the word race, and you use the word race, are we thinking about it in the same way, in sort of a shared way? And so, yeah, I love that, Carly.
The other thing too, to add to that as well, and this is where we get stuck sometimes with the individual learning. And so then how do we make this systemic? How do we institutionalize this work? And one way of doing that is thinking about the ways in which you are already supporting your teachers in the classroom. For example, if you're doing observations and providing feedback and instructional coaching, is there anything related to DEI, DEIB on those observation forms that you use, or in performance reviews? Has it been institutionalized behavior that you expect from all of your team? So that's one way too, to go just beyond that, like, oh, we're all learning together, to saying, okay, this is a value that we have as an institution, and because it's a value, it means that we're looking for these observable behaviors in our classrooms and from all the people who work here as well.
Yes.
Thank you for all of that.
Any other questions or things you'd like to share about the journey that you're on?
I'm curious. I'm just gonna ask a question. So I think what you said before about how a lot of schools really have great intentions, but it's the actions that sometimes fall short, or we don't know how to, take action maybe. What kind of things would you suggest for a school who's maybe in that pre-seed stage, which I feel like a lot of us said pre-seed? What kind of steps can they start taking to reach the seed stage, or then eventually transfer to sprout and tree?
Well, one of the things, and then I'll pass it to Carl. One of the things that we say, if possible, if you're not sure where everybody is, start with your coalition of the willing. Who's willing? Who's wanting to just say, I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I'm willing to start the work of thinking this through, right? Who's ready to start moving towards, we have good intentions, let's start taking action. And what does that look like, right? So that's like first. Carly, hop in here. What, yeah.
I'm thinking too, I think that there's a first place to start in getting some alignment on what does it mean to belong and what are our core values. So we talk about belongingness a lot. And one of the questions that we ask in our leadership residency is, what does belonging mean to you? What does it look like, feel like, smell like? And we talk about it as an entire group. And what that allows us to do is to say, well, if this is what belonging means to all of us collectively, then how do we
get there?
Take this into our organization? How do we create the systems and structures that get us there? The other place to start too is asking what our core values are. If we have core values related to equity, if we have core values relating to belongingness, then how are those showing up in our systems and structures? And then I think a third place to begin as well is community agreement. So if we know what it means to belong to us, if we know what our core values are, then what are we committed to as a community? And then we hold ourselves accountable to those commitments that we've made. So that's one place to really get the conversation rolling in a way that, you know, isn't too academic and isn't shaming people, but is starting that conversation about shared values and shared structures and systems to get there.
And you do that first, even before you're finding your coalition of the willing, right? So the coalition of the willing is like, okay, and who's ready to go deeper, right? That's setting the foundation. Like Carly said, that sense of belonging. We are here, we're together. And what you're really asking, can I show up authentically myself? That's what you're asking. And you want the answer for every single person to be yes. You want every person to be able to thrive within the organization.
Yeah. And I think a step after that, once you sort of establish some of those common values and common community agreements with one another, is to do team learning.
Yes.
It's, I think, a huge opportunity to, you know, bring people in a third party or do a book study like with that great book by Tiffany Jewell. But to learn together and to do it in a way that nobody's necessarily on the staff. You as a leader don't have to know everything. You don't have to be an expert in this. You can bring in an organization like Embracing Equity, or bring in a book that is so applicable, like Tiffany Jewell's book, How to Be Anti-Racist, and talk about it. Start having those conversations, because that's going to develop some of those sparks. It's going to plant some of those seeds to figure out who your coalition of the willing is. And the big part here is, if you're doing any sort of learning with any organization or anything internally, always ending with an action point. What next? What does this mean now that we've done this learning together? What action comes out of it? Because that's how you keep it from just a thought exercise to having a real impact on your organization and school community.
One question I have a little bit different is that when you're hiring a new staff member, obviously it'd be nice to have, or at least have a staff member who has similar values to start with. And not quite sure how to explore that, to see what kind of value system they have, because without really becoming intimidating to the individual in the interviews process in the beginning, what are your thoughts in terms of when you bring a new staff member? How do you approach that to make sure that you do start with the right kind of person who can be groomed with this kind of a thought process?
I mean, Wally, for me, when I was a sitting principal, it actually did start with the interview process for me. There were questions, because honestly, the candidate is interviewing you as well, and you want to set them up for success from the very beginning. So we talked about our organization prior to starting the interview process. We talked about what our values, our core values, back to the point that, well, Carly's on this side of me on the that's why I'm pointing that way. But we talked about what our core values were, what that means to us. And then we had questions peppered throughout the interview process to ask and to sort of get at what the person, where they may land. One of the questions we had on our interview committee was, how would you define racism? We just asked. Not that we were looking for anything in particular, but it kind of helped us know where folks were on that spectrum. We just straight up asked, and they were like, oh, they're serious about this. This is something. And of course, we talked about it. It wasn't a defining question in the sense of, oh, they blew that answer, so we're not going to hire them. It just let us know. And we also listened for them to say, okay, how would you define it? Because that let us know that they were willing to learn and to see what we thought it meant, So it was something that helped us. And then during the onboarding, again, not to only just do that one shot, this is just an onboarding, here's all the things you need to know, just really helping them understand that, again, this equity work that we're doing is not an addition to the plate. It is the plate. And we look at things through an equity lens. Our hiring, as you know, you just experienced it, right? Is what we say to them. Here's how it shows up in our classroom. Here's how it shows up in the work. We have some goals, like just really walking them through what it means. Part of our interview process for us was spending some time in our environment, because if you're really centering it, they'll feel it. They'll know it. They'll experience it. You want them to say, oh, there's something happening here. And I believe I belong here. You want them coming in the door feeling a sense of belonging. And so it's some of those things and more that we would do in order to help them feel that this truly is a priority for us. It's who we are. It's a part of our DNA.
Mhm. Well, and that's even, how you're attracting candidates as well. It's very clear what your core values are on your website or on your careers and culture page. Like, do people look at that and say, I see and espouse commitment to equity, anti-racism, and anti-bias education? And that's putting a stake in the ground. And I know some folks feel fearful that if they put that stake in the ground, it's going to turn off candidates. But what it actually does is it flags to candidates that are interested and invested and aligned on the same core values as you, that this is the place for them to come and work and to thrive and to be in a place where they're aligned with the mission and vision.
Yeah, that's how you begin to attract. Loud and proud, y'all.
Just going off of that, with the school websites that we help build, sometimes we build a career page, and we do always make sure to put the mission and vision on there, because just like Dr. Nicole and Carly have shared, that should attract the ideal candidates. They should be mission aligned. And if this is part of your mission, then hopefully they will be the right type of person that you want at your community.
Yay. All right, everybody. Yeah, Carly's dropping a resource. Make sure you see that resource in there.
Awesome. And make sure we will be sharing the chat transcript along with this. So if anyone wants to reference the links that were shared throughout the meeting, feel free. This recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. I'll also be sharing it with Carly and Nicole, so you can reach out to them as well with any questions. And it seems like some of you are looking forward to setting up your coaching session. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining today's call. And again, if you're watching the recording, all of the links and things like that are shared, you can access them as well in the description, or reach out to us at Nido Marketing or Embracing Equity for any questions, resources, if you're a Montessorian who wants to explore this topic further. Thank you so much, Carly and Nicole, for sharing your time with us and your expertise. Thank you for everyone who shared, because your collaboration is really what these calls are about. This is a space for you to voice your experiences, your questions, your ideas. So thank you so much to everyone here.
Thank you all so much. It was really nice to be with you today.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, y'all.